Nothing on earth and nothing in heaven will make women give way. It is impossible. That determination won women the right to vote. As we celebrate the centennial of the 19th Amendment, there's still work to do. Get started by registering to vote.
The crowning glory of American citizenship is that it may be shared equally by people of every nationality, complexion, and sex. Revel in the crowning glory by helping others register to vote.
There will never be a new world order until women are a part of it. Volunteer at the polls. Be an election judge or a poll worker.
The speediest way to educate the people is to give them the ballot. Educate yourself, get a sample ballot, and do the research before you cast your vote.
The vote is power. Use it intelligently, conscientiously, prayerfully. Consider mail-in voting if it's an option in your state. And if you choose to vote in person, allow extra time for long lines.
I am not taking this stand because I personally wish for recognition. I am doing it for the future benefit of my whole race. The movement tried to marginalize women of color. They showed up anyway. Honor them by showing up and voting.
If you want to accomplish anything, you must vote. It is not a question of right, but a duty, and I believe that to be the duty of every woman. You have a duty to know your rights and a responsibility to ask for help if you need it.
There will never be complete equality until women themselves help to make laws and elect lawmakers. Support female candidates by becoming a campaign volunteer, donating money, or running for elected office yourself.
We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity. Take on leadership roles in your own community.
The end is not yet in sight, but it cannot be far away. The road before us is shorter than the road behind. There is still much work to be done. Let's consider this milestone an opportunity to ensure equal voting rights for all.
Make every vote count.
So welcome back. I hope that you had fruitful conversations in your breakout rooms. We also hope that you will vote, help others to vote, research candidates on the whole ballot, and contribute to feminist futures in many more ways. Today's an opportunity to imagine feminist futures, and in doing so, to be bolder. Like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, do not be satisfied with the level of women's representation, as she said, until there are 9 on the Supreme Court and until there are the equivalent number everywhere else. We can create a feminist Ohio State. We can create feminist workplaces, classrooms, and halls of government. We can become complicit in all our liberations. I hope that your breakout sessions help to gain insight and inspiration, to raise your voice, to get involved in local politics, to lead change from wherever you are, and to make learning more equitable. In this closing session, we will share some of what we have learned throughout the day. So at this point, I would like you all to now share an insider observation you've made today. Just type it in the chat. We'll be saving these to get a fuller sense of what happened today, and also to share some of the recurring themes when we share the videos later. So go right ahead and share it in the chat. That's great. Women are powerful. Find and trust your voice. Nice. Women have the ability to speak up. Let's take another second, share it right in there. It's okay to be angry. Being an angry Black woman is pretty cool. Love these. Love these. Keep doing that. If you haven't already finished up sharing, keep sharing. You can share more than one if you want. What we want to do now is have each of our sort of moderator tech hosts share out what was discussed in their breakout sessions so that everyone can get a sense. I know many folks wanted to be in more than one breakout session. I certainly would have liked to have been in all of them. So this way we can get a sense. So the first session was raising our voices, writing for public audiences. And I'm going to ask Daryl Griffith to share some thoughts of how that went.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. So we had a really engaging and highly charged conversation around how your writing for a public audience can influence individuals that you don't even know. Janelle Hobson spoke on that with her relationship in writing, as well as with her publications in Miss Magazine. And she spoke to how your writing can contribute to a larger public conversation. It was actually a continued theme, as Jasmine also spoke about digital activism and the importance of continuing to write and expand for public audiences outside of that of academia, and how many of the research and studies that then live throughout our regular lives and issues can be used to address what's going on both in academia as well as elevating our own platform. So I personally, as a writer, really enjoyed hearing more, and I'm sure as many people felt, I wish the session could have lasted just even like a tiny bit longer as we got into some more questions. But yeah, those are some general, very high level overviews for us.
Great. And if anyone else from that session wants to share something in the chat that you took away that maybe Daryl didn't mention, go right ahead, feel free. So the next one was getting involved in local politics and activism. So I'm going to ask Mary to share.
Okay, thanks a bunch, Rachel. It was really, again, a great session. Our two guests, Council Member Favor and School Board Member Pierce, we talked at first about what sparked their activism. And for both of them, it literally, I mean, they started in their formative childhood years. And we kind of came to a conclusion as we went through the session that what happened for them was that all of a sudden they came to a place where they knew something was wrong. Now, they might not know why or how it got to be that way, but they knew it wasn't right. And then at that point, they found their voice as they were moving through time, and they would ask why, and then what can I do about it? Well, now they're both elected to office, and we got into the nuts and bolts of it as well. And I said, well, what are some of those things that you just don't understand until you're really in the midst of a race? And as so many things in this world, money. So I'll leave it there, but we can expand later.
Great, thank you, Mary. Now, next up was leading change wherever you are. This was the one in the main room. Strategies for women leaders. So I'm going to ask Diane Florian to share some of the key highlights.
Okay, now you can probably hear me. Kristen Cole and Dr. Angela Fitzpatrick presented this workshop and focused mainly on negotiation and made these points that negotiation is about working with leadership and creating a solution together. Suggested that you know your value, that one thing you can do is keep a running list of your accomplishments, your new skills, and other contributions to the team that you can access so that when it comes time to negotiate for anything, you have that available to you. Another tip is to decline to organize a meeting if you're asked to organize the meeting, and instead take on a larger assignment, which would be maybe developing the objectives for the meeting. know the right time to negotiate, to initiate a negotiation, check with the person's administrative assistant maybe to see what kind of mood they're in. There's a number of things to knowing the right time, but that was just one thing that was mentioned. And for project negotiation, just demonstrate that the project is important for the common good. And another point that was made is negotiation at home. We're finding that particularly at this time that, well, it's been going on for a long time now, but women at home are doing more of the work still. And with all the stress and all the ways women are being stretched right now, that's another point of negotiation, is at home with whatever, you know, your circumstances are, and making sure that you are not stretched too thin.
Thank you, Diane. So I was in the last breakout room, which was on making learning more equitable, education for a feminist future. And that was with Wendy Hesford and Aisha Hardiman. And they shared a number of really great ideas and resources, mostly focused around the idea of intersectionality as a way of providing kind of a framework for analysis and a form of analysis for students to address issues of sexism, racism, and other concerns. So we heard about focus on diversifying the syllabus. I really appreciated that the impulse to diversify the syllabus had come from requests from students themselves. And I think for a lot of us, it is helpful to remember that students want this kind of content as much as we do in terms of Black feminism, intersectional analysis, and all of it. We also heard about some really helpful practical tips, including an assignment where you might look just around you at, for example, political signs and Black Lives Matter signs and where they are in which neighborhoods and how it means something different in different kinds of geographies. We also got to share a little bit about different kinds of identities, including immigrant identities, and how that fits sometimes differently in a Black Lives Matter, Black feminist conversation than, for example, my identity as a white woman. So really great, a lot of discussion around allyship, white allyship. And so I really want to thank the presenters. And I want to take a moment for all of us to have just a little bit of shared sort of Q&A and broad questions or comments. You can put them in the chat. You can raise your hand in the chat function if you open your participants pane. If you want to raise anything for the good of the whole. And I'll pause a moment. And if we're all a bit zoomed out, that's understandable. I'm a faculty member, I can pause for a long time. Okay, that's long enough. So I do want to, before turning to some closing remarks, I want to ask all of you to just take a moment. Think to yourself, what is some intention that I can enact to further feminist futures, to create feminist futures? So I want you to pause for a moment, think of an intention or more than one intention, and actually write it down. You can put it in the chat if you want, but I want this to be somewhere where you will have it. So write it in your phone, on a document on your device, on a scrap of paper, a sticky note, wherever you want to write it. So this may be something that, I'll go ahead and put that in the chat, the text of my question. But, whoops. There we go. So yeah, take a moment to write that down. Some of you are other faculty, some of you are not faculty, but other employees at the university or in the community. Some of you may also be students. And so think about what you can do from where you are in the world, where you are in life. Obviously, for many of us, voting is going to be the most pressing and immediate. Some of us may have already done so. I voted last week. Okay. So now I'd like to offer some closing remarks. Thank you, first of all, to all of our presenters, all of our participants, for highlighting so many ways that we can all create feminist futures through our own actions and through catalyzing the actions of others. The goal of the Women's Place is to catalyze systemic change. This goal commands us to apply research about our past and our present to inform feminist futures. We know that our lives continue to be impacted by gendered norms, by racism, by heterosexism, ableism, and transphobia, and that oppression deepens where these intersect. I believe that it is necessary to understand oppression in order to dismantle it, and that the more of us who understand oppressions, the more change can happen. Today, we've heard ideas about health and wellness, promoting equity for women of color, and using our own righteous anger. You've also shared and heard creative ideas for action this afternoon, and I want to share a few further ways that feminists are creating the future nationwide. In the pandemic through which we are all living, women have demonstrated effective leadership. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern led authentically to keep cases low. Norway's Erna Solberg hosted events to teach children how to stay safe from the novel coronavirus and also to calm their fears. Chancellor Angela Merkel did not shy away from the facts of rising infections in Germany, leading to better policies. Women's leadership kept people safer and economies stronger in Taiwan, Bangladesh, and Iceland as well. Living through an international crisis where many of us are interacting only from within our own homes can make us feel small, powerless, and disconnected. Nonetheless, crises that break down the status quo provide an opportunity to create a different future. Hawaiian feminists in the state government released a recovery plan this summer that centered women and Native Hawaiians in economic recovery. The development of this plan is an example of how women can lead from where they are, especially when they reach out to more marginalized women. Here at Ohio State, the pandemic is having intense effects on our students, staff, and faculty of all genders. It is evident from a survey conducted by the Women's Place that women and femmes are shouldering more of the added burdens in their personal and professional lives. The pandemic made visible the precarity, overwork, and lack of a safety net that many women and caregivers were already experiencing, and it deepened those problems. At Ohio State and around the country, it is up to all of us to create futures of stability and care. If we do not, we may lose forever the voices of many women and caregivers from professional careers, political life, and academic scholarship. It is easy to think that only people with titles and positions have the ability to catalyze the future, and I could not disagree more. The pandemic has accelerated the work of feminist activists to connect through social media and even technologies like Zoom. No longer do we depend on those privileged with passports and plane tickets to speak to power. Unfortunately, many remain excluded by lack of access to technologies such as broadband internet. In her poem, An Atlas of the Difficult World, lesbian feminist Adrienne Rich speaks of a map of our country that includes a sea of indifference and a desert where missiles are planted like corms. Written in the midst of the first Gulf War in 1990 to 1991, the poem is a litany of grief and anger, and yet it concludes as both a charge and a salve. In the second to last stanza, she writes, "A patriot is not a weapon. A patriot is one who wrestles for the soul of her own country." I want us all to wrestle for a feminist future and to not drown in the sea of indifference. It is not divisive to recognize the existence of patterns nor of problems. We can see one another's humanity and different experiences and use that as the foundation of a bridge to a feminist future. In the same poem, Rich tells an imagined interlocutor, I honor your truth and I refuse to leave it at that. For me, this is a demand to do more than understand. This is a demand to act and to catalyze action around us. So may 2020 teach us more than how to bear difficulty and grief. May it teach us to build more just futures, anti-racist futures, feminist futures. As we seek to rebuild economically, let us not lose sight of the damage being done to our environment and our climate. Let us make visible the greater burdens that economic turmoil and environmental devastation place on women and people of color here and around the world. Let us recognize the intertwining of violence, including gender-based violence, with the lack of access to healthcare, clean water and air, personal security, and a decent life. The future is always created, imagined, by people like us who cannot yet clearly see where we are going or how we will get there. If we will not imagine this future, we cannot create it. It is my hope that we've catalyzed change and connection today. May we honor each other's truths and also refuse to leave it at that. In closing, let me offer my profound gratitude to the entire staff of the Women's Place, including Dr. Andrea Williams, Interim Director, Diane Florian, Mary Bo Robinson, Daryl Griffith, and our student worker, Ebian Farah. Today was truly a group effort. Our efforts were made lighter by the assistance of the Office of Advancement Events and Programs, especially Shannon Camarucci and Emily Wander, who worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Thank you also to all our presenters, moderators, and our participants in this afternoon's breakout sessions. We would also like to acknowledge the land that Ohio State University occupies is the ancestral and contemporary territory of the Shawnee, Potawatomi, Delaware, Miami, Peoria, Seneca, Wyandot, Ojibwe, and Cherokee peoples. Specifically, the university resides on land ceded in the 1795 Treaty of Greenville and the forced removal of tribes through the Indian Removal Act of 1830. We want to honor the resiliency of these tribal nations and recognize the historical context that has and continue to affect the indigenous peoples of this land. I hope that you are as inspired to act as we are.